Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Pam Ford, and I am the Executive Director of New Day Employment Network. We are the recipient of a Healthy Illinois grant, and we have been charged with the responsibility to create programming around racial healing. And
Yes.
indicative, I think, this week of what's been transpiring in our country. We were in the process of creating this show weeks ago, but so it just sort of fell in place, I think, after the last couple of days. So at any rate, I want to introduce everybody that's on the panel. And for those that's out in the listening audience and even our panelists, this is a difficult topic to discuss. It is not easy. I appreciate each of you, coming together. It's a hard conversation. And we have assembled a diverse group of panelists to talk about this subject. None of us are experts as PhDs, but we're experts in what we feel, what we know, what we feel. So that was the whole premise behind bringing together this format, because I think it's some things that needs to be discussed. And one of the things that I think that's important, and I love quotes. And so to break the monotony a little bit, I love, one of the quotes, and it's called, it says, "It is not our difference that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences." And that's what it's all about. We have to celebrate our differences. We may not agree with them, but we have to agree to disagree. Okay? Agree to disagree. So again, I'm Pam Fort, and I have two program coordinators that help coordinate this dialogue this evening. To my left is Kaylin Patterson, and to my right is Sherry Williams. So I'm going to have both Kaylin and Sherry, and we'll start with the ladies. Kaylin,
please
share a little bit about who they are, and then they will introduce the panelists, and you all will do the same. And let's keep it to about 30 seconds of who you are, okay? All right, Sherry.
Okay, I'm Sherry Williams, and I am a retiree from the Will County Sheriff's Department, where I worked for 35 years. And I'm also beginning to be a community activist. I've gotten involved a lot more since I have retired. I'm also a union activist. I was very active in my union, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, Local 1028. And I'm so very happy to be here tonight because I think this is an important discussion, and I think we got a lively panel here, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Thank you, Sherry. Kaylin?
My name is Kaylin Patterson, Midwest Muscle Podcast, all kinds of things, natural bodybuilding, drug-free. I do a lot of personal training. I'm also a cardio kickboxing instructor. And I've been very active in our community because I see that the men have to step up if we're going to be true leaders. We have to be leaders in the community as well as our environment, and basically grabbing hold of everything that's being lost in our nation.
Thank you. So Sherry, would you like to introduce the women panelists this evening?
Okay. We have today Ms. Sunny Choi Williams, and she's going to introduce a little bit about herself after I get my next person here, Michelle Stiff. And Sunny, you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Sherry. My name is Sunny Choi Williams, and I'm the city attorney for City of Lockport. I've been the city attorney since 2017. Prior to that, I was with the city of Peoria for nearly 18 years. Started as assistant corporation counsel. I've been very active in community efforts, and diversity is very near and dear to my heart. I co-chair the diversity committee for the Peoria County Bar. I actually received the Illinois State Bar Association Diversity Leadership Award back in 2009 for all my efforts in making sure that the legal profession reflects the community that they serve.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Stiff. I am an administrator in Joliet 86. I currently sit on the Joliet Township High School Board. I'm going into my third year. I have been involved in politics for about the last 4 years. I I sit on a couple of boards as well, the Illinois Democratic Women of Will County, as well as the Will County Democratic Organization. So, and I've been in education. I've been an educator for approximately 18 years. So thank you for having me this evening.
Welcome. Thank you. Kaylin?
I have 3 panelists, and I'm going to introduce their names, and then I'll let them go in the order that their names are introduced so they can introduce themselves. Andre Bradley, Jake Nahorsky, and Ponce Vargas. So please, guys, introduce yourselves in that order, and let's get this party started. Andre.
Hi, my name is Andre Bradley. I'm a father of 2. I am an account manager for Rent-A-Center, and I'm just excited about the conversation and the dialogue that we are all going to be able to partake in this evening.
Jake.
My name is Jake Nahorsky. I'm also a father of 2, and I'm a construction estimator, project manager, and somebody that I like people, different types of people. And I was actually very honored to be asked to participate in this discussion. So hopefully we can get to know each other more and hopefully just keep the good discussions going to make good changes.
All right, thank you. Ponce.
Hey guys, I'm Ponce, small business owner. I own a small CrossFit gym in Joliet, and I'm an Iraq War veteran in the U.S. Army. I'm just excited to learn more about diversity and how people feel, and just kind of looking forward to the conversation. And hopefully, I can share my experiences and learn a lot more from everyone else's experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to get ready and turn it over to Kaylin. I just want to do a couple house rules really quick. The first thing is that I just want to reiterate that each of our opinions are our own, and I want everyone to respect each person's opinion, because someone's opinion of you is not your reality. It is their opinion. And the second thing is just to adhere to the rules. I know that some of us can get carried away because we're so passionate about what we believe, but we want to try to make sure that whatever the answers are that the questions that you're answering, that you keep it to 2 to 3 minutes. And I am like a horse when it comes to watching the time, because I think it's important for everybody's perspective to be heard. So, Kaylin, I will turn it over to you.
And I appreciate that, and I'm honored to be here. One of the things I'd like to talk about is, especially with what just happened over this past week, there's a moral and mental defect in some way that brings out these kind of behaviors in such a mass and mob mentality. And there's a narrative that's being said over and over again, and these are the biases that we're talking about, and basically bringing about into the understanding that this is not a reality that's really real. When you hear it, the first thing you say is, I don't want to accept this. That means your bias is already kicked in before we even go any further into the conversation. And I'm very concerned of the narratives that are being spread because of the biases. I've already got a background of anger and frustration, and basically I'm going to make sure that I have my point said to where it drives it home, even if it's through your head or your heart. I don't care how much it hurts. So if we're getting away from reality, because these are immoral actions, these are unnatural things that are happening, and we're trying to make it seem like they are normal things that go about in society. They are not. And it's really shocking to see how many people will push behind it because they're well liked. They're considered a high status or on some kind of a platform that seems to be something that I either agree with originally or I've been talked into. And so I'll take on those biases basically just to keep staying friendly with whoever I'm attached to or thinking I'm attached to. And one of the things that was going on with this week especially is these were situations that I said 4 months ago were illegal, immoral, and just flat out wrong, and people should be thrown in jail and whatever. And I said, well, if that's the narrative then, why isn't it the narrative now? Because if we're talking about addressing a situation, we had a group of people that said, we have something to say, we want to be heard, and listen to us. And now we have the flip side of the coin where the same thing is happening, and they're saying, listen to us. Mm-hmm. And even if we have to get violent to be heard, we will do so. 4 months ago, mm-hmm. What was the difference? And so, because of our biases, we didn't want to hear then, but now we're supposed to hear now. And I'm saying there's something wrong with that disconnect where we think this is an okay ideology where I have to be heard, but you do not. If we're even and equal in life, if we have to have equity in human life, then where's the equality of it? And so one of the things that I've been staunchly against is trying to make all policemen evil. Because if you do that, then my dad was an evil man because he was a cop for 35 years. Does that mean he became less black in the process of becoming more blue? So I don't understand that way of thinking, and I never will, because I know when you put that badge on, your life is at risk every time you walk that street.
And Kaylin, just like you said, and I totally agree, and I think most of us probably agree with what you're saying. And then even just talking about the implicit bias video, I know mm-hmm. one thing that that you're going to share. You want to get everybody's perspective on that. So I'm anxious to hear people's perspective on that.
Well, and let's start with our panel, because I want to see what they think, because mm-hmm. I've said enough right now, mm-hmm. and let's give them some time, because I don't want to be taking up all the time. So guys, mm-hmm. Go ahead and jump in and let's get this going. So Andre, we'll start with you.
Okay, so based off the video, I realized that it's something that we do every day. It's something that all of us do. In some shape, form, or fashion. And I don't think anything is wrong when we're talking about implicit bias, when we're saying, when we're pairing, I'm going to take a shower and then I know that deodorant goes with my armpits, or my favorite basketball team, and I'm looking at a bull and I say, okay, I'm thinking of Chicago Bulls. I don't think anything is wrong with it when I pair it that way. But when it's paired as oh, that's Andre, he's a black guy, and if I'm walking past a white lady or a white man and they kind of pull away, or they feel like they are clutching onto their purse or things like that, and then it makes me feel like then it does bother me. It bothers me being a dad of 2 children and trying to raise them to not see color, because of course we see color. Treat everyone based off of their heart, based off of their actions. So like for me, I'm kind of confused, because growing up for me, I didn't see it the way I see it now. The school I went to, it was pretty diverse. There were more white people than black, but I didn't have the conversations at home when you go to school, do this, or when you go to the bus or you see the police officers, make sure that you're compliant and don't say anything back, So now being in a position to try and make my kids understand, it's difficult for me. So for me, like I said, I'm just confused. I'm trying to understand, why does our color have to be perceived as a weapon, or like we come to pose threats. I just really want to understand of it. I don't get it. It's disheartening. It's just very disheartening.
Mm-hmm. Especially when you realize lives are at risk, and one of them could be your own or someone you know. So that it's really crucial that you bring that in. Go ahead, Ben.
No, go ahead. No, thank you so much, Andre. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Jay?
Are you on?
Yeah, I'd also watched the original videos. I wasn't, I guess, super aware of even what implicit bias was until Pam asked me to be on this. I kind of dove into it. One of the ways that I learn is I listen to podcasts a lot. So I listened to quite a few of them, and it was very eye-opening for me to realize that, you know, I like to consider myself a very open and welcoming person. I've always been very curious, you know, and you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I harbor any deliberate biases at all, but you know, once I started diving into the implicit bias and what it means, and you know, it is something that we do that we don't realize that we do. One of the podcasts I listened to, they described that it should be treated as a step, so that before we react the way that maybe, you know, subconsciously, you know, our brain is telling us to react, we gotta address it or address it and take that opportunity to kind of change, you know, the way that we would respond. One of the articles that I had read led me to this. There's an implicit bias test that you could take through. It's at implicit.harvard.edu. And I took it twice, because the first time I took it, and it was very, very upsetting, because it said I had I have it written down here. I think it was a moderate automatic prejudice or preference to white over black. And I don't know, it just hurt my feelings. So I took it again, and it was the same thing. So it is just interesting. I mean, just from my own experience, or just things that I've heard people talk about, I know there is, and maybe this is getting too deep or whatever, but I know there is a from what I've heard, there is a evolutionary reaction against people that aren't like us. And this is from, you know, thousands and thousands of years of human beings evolving.
You're talking tribal, yeah.
And I kind of understand that, you know, because not that it makes it right. I mean, we should be more of a civilized and more of an accepting society. So we need to kind of get past our primitive brains and really try to understand how to live in more harmony, you know, in that respect.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you, Jake.
You're welcome.
Bonds?
I really don't know where to start. I mean, I understand on the surface what implicit bias is, and like Jake was kind of stating about the evolutionary part of it, and like I'm kind of a nerd, and I kind of think like how important that part of the brain is for like pure survival. But at the same time, we're kind of past that level of like living in constant safety in our homes and things like that, and we should kind of like Jake was saying, try to figure out ways to elevate above that. And sometimes I get stuck personally, like being in Iraq twice, I have these mechanisms that I deal with things back home that aren't what I should be doing. But it's kind of like you worry about things on the road, you worry about people here, you worry about what they're going to do there. And I think it even goes deeper than that. Growing up in Joliet, I just knew a lot of friends that were in gangs, and I was around that when I was younger. And I was actually assaulted by two young black men, and I had my hat stolen. And I think I could have let that really change my life and really let me create like a whole narrative of like everyone is like that. And everyone's against me and things like that. But I wanted better for myself and for my friends and things like that. And not everybody's like that. And but I think sometimes our environment shapes how we view a lot of things. And I just think it's, I think it's important for us to kind of really try hard to and I've been doing a lot of searching in the last year or so about how I am as a person and things like that. And I think we can all, I don't like to say we, I think I can find ways for myself to be more responsible for how I feel.
Yeah.
I don't know. I got a lot of thoughts in my head, but I just think I can do better to be more accepting of everybody.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Hans. Mhm.
Now, there's 3 points I'd like to bring out, and especially dealing with the biases, because you're like you, I'm a war veteran from the Middle East, and the one thing I wanted to make sure to do was not to take the, as I'm fighting for my country, to be fighting for it and not come home to be at war with it. And that was one of the biggest things I had to promise myself. I had to promise, like you said, we all have to, we're accountable for ourselves and our actions. And I realized that I was used to fighting. And I did not want to bring that mentality back home, because I'm looking at my fellow Americans as the enemy, and I never wanted to do that. So I said that I can't get in that mindset from day one, coming back landside. So the second thing is, with my dad being a policeman, he had already showed me that in a way, because he said, in order for all these black kids to be bad, then my kids have to be bad. So he had to really do a lot of self-reflecting and keeping himself in check to make sure that he wasn't getting out of pocket with saying those biases that we watched in the video. And then with the video itself, where we can, if we're not questioning ourselves, we're not questioning reality. Because if we are part of reality and we say we hold no part in it other than being right, then we're wrong from the beginning. Pam, if I'm wrong, help me out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, I think Sunny next. Yeah.
Thank you. I think the panelists make great points. These implicit biases are subconscious. They're in our primal, back in there. I think it's a pituitary gland that comes in. But what makes it more impactful and negative toward what happens especially in the criminal justice system, is that implicit bias persuade or sway decisions that are made quickly.
Yes.
Guess
Yes.
what decisions are made quickly? Bail bond amounts, whether sentencing, things like that, where you have that subconscious stereotype biases that come into play. And unfortunately, when you look at the sentencing and bail bond amounts, is disparately against the the minorities, the people who are in prison or arrested. They're automatically given a higher bond, higher sentences for people of color versus their Caucasian or white counterparts. So that's what is the most things that we have to make sure that, number one, we recognize that everyone has implicit bias, but two, we have to get the decision makers, the judges, the employers to recognize that they have implicit bias and make sure that their decisions are being done on a neutral, more deliberative way than trying to think on top of your head, because that's what impacts people who end up getting hired, people who end up getting released faster. So that impacts the community, and that's what I think shackles a lot of the communities from being able to be hired for leadership, being voted into offices, making changes in laws that impact everybody, and especially policing. So when you are looking at policing, the officers are human beings. They're out there and they have to make split decision right there in the midst of chaos, in the midst of stress. So they have to go through implicit bias training to recognize that they have implicit bias. And everyone should take that Harvard, implicit bias test and believe me, everybody has it. I mean, it's like you want to take the test over and over again, thinking, no, I can't have biases. No, everybody does. Is to recognize that you do have it and to make sure that you slow that process down and make sure that it doesn't impact any decisions or anybody else that affects you. So, I'm a huge promoter of implicit bias training, because we have to do that. We have to make sure that our judges, the prosecutors, the legislators, the voters, the community know about that, because that's where decisions happen. You have people who are in power, but guess what? Most people who are in power, the judges and lawyers, legislators, they tend to be, mostly older white men. And so we have to recognize that. And there's studies out there where there's a study out regarding, law firms and hiring and grading memo that's written by the same person. It's the same memo, but you have half of them say that they're, Caucasian law students. The other half, is African American. And if you look at the points and the comments that they receive, exactly the same. They find more errors in the African American, law student. They have lower scores on it, but it's the same memo. So we have to recognize it's in there. But I think that the lesson is that we have to recognize that we have to change that.
Absolutely. Amen. Thank you so much, Sunny.
And Michelle, did you have an opinion on that too?
Yes,
I do. First, I want to say what happened the other day at the Capitol building. I think it's just, these are systemic behaviors that we've been seeing all of my life, right? And so, I worked in corporate America prior to becoming an educator, and I sat in diversity training. And when you hear people, describe, we went through an exercise, and it was implicit bias. It was, what you felt, heard, or believed about other races, right? And so to hear people describe themselves as pure and honest, but then when it comes to people of color, we were lazy, and so when I think about what happened at the Capitol building and how they were unprepared, it's because of how they looked, right? And so as an educator, we also deal with, the implicit bias, because as you know, in education, the majority of our teacher population is Caucasian. And when you are in a district where you have a very diverse student population, you find a high level of consequences or expulsions of minority students. And it's because of the mixed match. So when you have, your white teachers who has a lack of experience dealing with other cultures, they don't understand it, right? So they're taking their implicit bias and they're making judgments on these students. So for instance, we know, our African-American kids, they can be loud, right? And so if you have a teacher that's very mild-mannered and she's speaking to a student who can get loud, that may be viewed as disrespect, right? So those are some, just a very small example of how we see implicit bias in education. But just to echo what Sunny said, we all have them. I like to consider myself having a very diverse group of friends. And I too still, have some implicit bias, and even against, and I'm gonna have to say this, admit it, even against my own people sometimes, right? But I have to check my thinking, like, stop, do not do that. right? And so,
Good.
yeah, so, you know, that's my take on that. But we have to check ourselves before we proceed or before we say anything, and just kind of be more open-minded. And so, you know, you may perceive one thing, and then after the conversation, it was like, oh, that wasn't so bad, was it? Right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things we have to do is really look at ourselves, but also just stop and think. I know that's been taught in my family, you know, think twice, speak once, whatever it takes to think it out. And because we're running on emotion. And if you notice, a lot of people have lost hope because they have no more emotions to run off of. So I think if we just basically take that time, take a deep breath and think, just think, we'll be doing much better than what we're doing by constantly reacting off of emotion. Pam?
Thank you so much, Kaylin. Appreciate that. Take a breath, everyone. Take a breath.
Yes.
Musa, as we call it.
Can I add one quick thing
Sure.
to that effect?
Sure.
I can't exactly remember who said it, but it's a quote that I have heard. There's stimulus and then there's response, but in between the two, there's a gap. And we got to realize, even though sometimes it may seem like that gap is like that big, you got to do your best to try to make it wider, because in that gap, you have your ability to change your response the appropriate way. There's the stimulus, then there's that gap, and then either you let your implicit bias take over and give you the response, or start to, you know, be more aware of what your automatic response is and try to do the right thing, I guess, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Jake. Okay, so thank you, Kaylin, for this first segment.
It's a pleasure.
No problem.